Well, we have a census, and we have had one since 1790, actually, even before the Constitution was completely ratified. We have it because the Constitution provides for the distribution of the Electoral College votes and members in the House of Representatives based on population. So we had to have population information in order to decide how many seats in the House of Representatives in the United States Congress each state would have and how many electoral votes they would have was the original purpose. So it really is very much tied to the history of American democracy.
But it's changed quite a lot. The questions, the information they gather.
Yes, it actually has changed a lot over time in a couple of ways. And I guess I want to preface that by saying it's a very remarkable experience because it's so public. We have lots of other ways that we gather data in this country, but nothing that is quite as public as the census and so participatory. So in a lot of ways, it is, once again, representative of kind of who we are and how we think of ourselves. And it really is the time that we look forward, but it's also the time we look back. So when you think about the history of the census, like in 1890 is when Frederick Jackson Turner said the frontier is over because he looked at the census figures. And so it's an opportunity for us to look at where we were and then also where we're going. And it's also changed dramatically. Historians do a lot of work about the census because of who asked the questions. And so when the census was done in person, which it always was for most of its history, there was a question. If white men asked black women questions in the census, would they be willing to tell the true story? If we asked people whose first language wasn't English questions, would they really understand what we asked? We also have a lot of evidence that sometimes the census taker answered the question the way he, in most cases, thought the answer ought to be, as opposed to what the person actually told him. So the whole study of the census is involved in all kinds of social and cultural issues about Americans and their views of themselves or their views of how they think they ought to be. And now, since we do it primarily by mail, then that allows for a whole different kind of anonymity than existed before, but it does require that people take a positive action. And that's much more complicated. I think when the person comes to your door and forces you to answer the question, you have to take responsibility for answering the census questions. And you need to do that because the answers have big impact, not just on politics, but also on social policy.
Well, this year, the census form was 10 questions.
Yes.
Where does all that other information come from?
Well, sometimes we do it through surveys, but now we have electronic means that we can garner the information that we used to gather by hand by asking people questions. And we also have a whole lot of other bureaucratic entities, unemployment, Social Security, other aspects of the government that keep track of things like that. And we have the federal income tax that we didn't used to that keeps track of income. So we have all kinds of other parts of the government that keep track of different pieces of information that we don't have to ask in the census anymore. So basically all we're doing in this census is asking some questions about race and ethnicity and background and counting folks.
How does the census impact the university?
Well, I mean, the census impacts the university, I think, because we are part of the wider community, and so it impacts us in terms of the election situation in Idaho and in this area. But it also impacts the university because all of the changes in population that the census identify often are used by people in Congress and in the federal government to make decisions about policy in terms of programs and directions that also has an impact on the university. When you think about the university's interest in natural resources and agriculture and fisheries and wildlife and all of those kinds of topics, well, people in Washington, D.C. use the census as a way to help make decisions about that. And I think the recent healthcare debate is a really good example. The kinds of people and the numbers of people and where they are often has some relevance to what people in Washington and in bureaucracies in the legislature are doing in terms of decision making. So it's really important to us all that the census be as accurate as it can be, so that those people make informed decisions that impact us in a pretty serious way on a number of levels.
As a historian, as a social researcher, I would think you would just love the census.
Historians do love the census. They love it not just for the numbers, but we get really excited about even the whole process of how it is that we ask the questions and who responded and why didn't they, and what do we think it really tells us. And yes, we do get very excited about that, which probably says as much about historians as about the census.